The air conditioning in the grand conference hall of Ouagadougou roared at full blast, but it was useless against the kind of heat that comes from unspoken threats and eyes that refuse to blink. At the head of a polished mahogany table sat President Ibrahim Traoré, not in a tailored suit, but in his worn military fatigues. His red beret lay on the table, a silent reminder of the soldier he used to be, and perhaps still was. He sat motionless, his hands clasped, his expression unreadable. Across from him were three men whose names were whispered in fear throughout the region. They weren't diplomats. They weren't politicians. They were warlords. Commander Kosi, General Bamba, and the one known only as the Ghost. For years, they had ruled the lawless borderlands with bullets and brutality. The idea that these men could walk freely into the capital, into the presidential palace, no less, without handcuffs or snipers trained on them, was nothing short of madness. But Traoré had personally guaranteed their safety for 24 hours. No tricks. No traps. He wanted to talk. Or so they thought. The table was set for peace. But nothing about this meeting felt peaceful. Not the untouched water glasses. Not the silent guards posted like statues in the corners. Not the smirk on Commander Kosi's face as he leaned back in his leather chair like he owned the room. "You asked for our terms, Mr. President," Kosi said, his voice gravel-thick and lazy. "We brought them. But I'll tell you now, we're not interested in half-measures." Traoré didn't blink. "I'll pay any price for peace," he said, calm as stone. "But not a cent for slavery." That's when Kosi reached into his jacket. Every guard in the room tensed. Hands hovered near triggers. But he didn't pull a gun, just a thin, blue folder. He slid it across the table with a smirk. "This," he said, "is the roadmap to peace. Sign it, and the fighting stops by sunset." Traoré's fingers hovered above the folder, sensing something off. He opened it. What he saw inside didn't just surprise him. It froze the blood in his veins. It wasn't a treaty. It wasn't even a demand. It was a trap. And it meant only one thing: the enemy wasn't outside the gates. The enemy was already in the room. The moment Traoré saw the first line inside the folder, the air in the room seemed to vanish. This wasn't a treaty. It was a betrayal mapped out in black and white. It was a list. Meticulously itemized and labeled, of every underground weapons bunker, ammunition cache, and ghost site the army had built in the past 6 months. Locations that didn't exist on any official records. Places only 3 people in the entire country were supposed to know about. And yet, here they were. Printed. Documented. Sliding across his desk like a death warrant. Traoré didn't show emotion. He didn't flinch. But inside, his mind was racing. This wasn't just a breach. This was a message. "We see you. We know where you hide your strength." Kosi leaned forward, voice low, confident. "Impressive list, right? And don't worry, we're not asking for everything. Just one thing." Traoré raised an eyebrow. "You'll sign an executive order," Kosi said, "handing over full control of the northern mining sector to our partners. You do that, and we pretend this list never existed." Silence. Thick. Heavy. The northern mining sector. The richest gold deposit in the country. Billions in untapped resources. The backbone of any future national recovery. Traoré had fought tooth and nail to keep it sovereign, out of the hands of foreign corporations eager to strip the land for profit. And now, the so-called rebels wanted to give it away, for a cut. It wasn't about justice. It wasn't about rights. It wasn't even about rebellion. It was about greed. They were robbers. Criminals in camouflage. And this was a heist. I see, Traoré said calmly, scanning their faces. So that's the price of peace now? Gold. General Bamba, silent until now, spoke. His voice was rough, tired, but firm. We don't need peace. We need control. Give us the mines, and you live to see another day. Refuse, and those bunkers turn to dust before sunrise. The puzzle clicked into place. The threats. The timing. The foreign interests. This wasn't a negotiation. It was extortion. Traoré slowly closed the folder, his fingers firm, unshaken. He glanced at Colonel Dio sitting beside him. Just a flicker of movement, Dio avoiding his gaze, a single bead of sweat trailing down his temple. That was all it took. Traoré had found his rat. Traoré's gaze sharpened as he studied Colonel Dio. The man who had once mentored him, once sworn to protect the nation's secrets, was sweating, not profusely, just enough for a trained eye to catch. A single bead tracing a slow path down his temple. He wouldn't meet Traoré's eyes. That was enough. The president stood slowly, the wooden chair scraping across the marble floor with a harsh screech that made everyone in the room flinch. The rebel bodyguards stiffened, their hands hovering near their weapons. But Traoré didn't reach for a gun. He walked to the window and stared out at the capital, the city that had nearly been sold in silence. You want the mines, he said, his voice calm but lethal. You want to sell our future so you can live like kings? He turned back around, eyes glowing with fire. I have a counter-offer. Kosi scoffed, pulling out a satellite phone. You have no cards to play, Ibrahim. 5 minutes. Sign, or I make the call. Traoré didn't hesitate. Make the call. Kosi paused, blinking in confusion. What? I said, Traoré repeated, his tone now iron, make the call. Blow the bunkers. Do it. A thick silence flooded the room. Kosi hesitated, trying to find the bluff in Traoré's eyes. But all he saw was terrifying confidence. He hit the call button. Nothing. No tone. No connection. Just empty static. Kosi frowned, stepped toward the window, lifted the phone higher. Still nothing. A flicker of panic crossed his face. You're in a Faraday cage, Traoré said, folding his arms. The moment that door sealed behind you, this room became a digital black hole. No signals in. No signals out. Shock rippled through the rebels. General Bamba's hand twitched. The ghost remained still, expression unreadable. Kosi's face drained of color. You're bluffing. That list, those bunkers, were emptied 3 days ago, Traoré cut in coldly. He grabbed the blue folder and tossed it onto Colonel Dio's lap. Every rifle. Every crate of ammunition. Moved. He stepped forward, his voice low, deadly. Only 3 people had access to this list. Me. The chief of intelligence. And you. Dio's face crumbled. I knew we had a leak, Traoré continued. So I fed the traitor bad intel, and waited. Guards emerged from the shadows, rifles raised, red lasers dotting rebel chests. The trap had closed. And Dio, the man who thought he could sell out his country and walk away rich, looked like he had just seen the floor vanish beneath his feet. As the room descended into chaos, warlords disarmed, traitors exposed, guards taking control, one figure hadn't moved. The third rebel leader. The ghost. He had remained silent through the shouting, the accusations, the lasers trained on his chest. While Kosi and Bamba panicked, the ghost had calmly checked his wristwatch, like a man waiting for a train. And then, he smiled. It wasn't the smirk of someone defeated. It was the smile of a man exactly where he wanted to be. Slowly, deliberately, he began to clap. The sound echoed unervingly across the silent hall. "Brilliant," he said, his voice cultured, smooth, oddly elegant for a warlord. "Truly brilliant, Mr. President. You caught the rat. You moved the weapons. You played the game perfectly." He rose to his feet. The red laser dots danced on his chest, but he didn't flinch. "But you made one mistake." Traoré's eyes narrowed. "You assumed we needed a phone signal to hurt you," the ghost said. "You assumed the threat was outside." He tapped the face of his wristwatch. "I didn't come here to negotiate. And I didn't come here to leave. I came to deliver." And then he unbuttoned his jacket. What lay underneath wasn't body armor. It was a bomb vest, tight, wired, blinking. And the timer? It wasn't counting down in minutes. It was counting in seconds. 15. 14. 13. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Panic began to swell. The guards froze, trained killers suddenly powerless. You couldn't shoot a bomb. You couldn't outrun it. "Everyone down!" Traoré roared. But while others dove for cover, he did the opposite. He charged. In that instant, Ibrahim Traoré stopped being a president. He became a soldier. A blur of motion, he grabbed the solid mahogany chair that Dio had been sitting in and swung with all his strength. It slammed into the ghost's ribs with a crunch of wood and bone. The ghost stumbled, arms flailing, but the timer kept ticking. 10. 9. Traoré didn't stop. He tackled the rebel leader, wrapping his arms around the bomb vest. Not trying to disarm it, there was no time for that. He was aiming for the only exit that mattered, the massive floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the palace gardens. Built to resist bullets. Not men. With everything he had, Traoré slammed the ghost against the glass. Spiderweb cracks exploded across the surface. 7. 6. He drove forward again, one final burst of force. The glass shattered. An explosion of shards. And the two men, locked together, tumbled into the open air, 3 stories above the Capitol. For a second, they were weightless. Then, the world erupted. A deafening boom rocked the palace. Windows shattered. Walls trembled. Smoke and fire billowed into the sky. Inside the conference room, soldiers and rebels alike were thrown to the floor. Ears rang. Chaos reigned. And down below, where the garden once was, now smoldered a crater. Of the ghost, there was nothing left. And of President Traoré? No sign at all. Only silence. The smoke hung heavy over the palace lawn. Alarms wailed in the distance, a chorus of chaos echoing through the shattered windows. The grand conference hall was in ruins, glass blown out, tables overturned, the scent of smoke and scorched earth clinging to every surface. No one moved. No one breathed. Commander Kosi stared at the jagged window frame in disbelief. General Bamba looked like he had aged 20 years in a minute. Even Colonel Dio, once defiant, now sat slumped against the wall, his face buried in his hands. The president was gone. Vaporized. Sacrificed. They had seen him fall. They had seen the explosion. It was over. Then, something moved. In the crater below, beneath the dirt and debris, a medic's hand brushed aside a hunk of twisted metal. And froze. A hand. Not lifeless, but twitching. Without a word, the medic dropped to his knees, digging with frantic hands. From the earth, coated in ash and blood, a figure emerged, half buried, half broken. It was him. Ibrahim Traoré. Barely breathing. Face torn, uniform shredded, blood running down his temple. But alive. Somehow, against all odds, alive. The ghost's body had taken the brunt of the blast. The fall had nearly killed him. But not quite. As medics rushed forward with a stretcher, Traoré shoved them aside. "My pistol," he rasped, his voice a growl of shattered gravel. "Give me my pistol." A stunned lieutenant handed it over. Traoré checked the chamber, wincing as pain lanced through his shoulder. Then, slowly, he turned. And limped. Up the stairs. Across the blood-stained marble. Leaving a trail of red footprints behind him. He didn't ask for help. He didn't ask for water. He was going back, to finish what he started. The door to the conference room creaked open. Framed in smoke and ruin stood Ibrahim Traoré, bloodied, burned, limping, but alive. Kosi stumbled backward, his face pale, eyes wide with disbelief. "No," he whispered. "I saw you fall. You can't be." Traoré didn't speak. He stepped forward, each step leaving a dark, wet print on the marble. His pistol hung loosely at his side. His eyes burned, not with rage, but something deeper. Something colder. The room fell completely silent. He stopped inches from Kosi. "I told you," Traoré said, voice low, calm. "I'm willing to pay the price." Then he leaned in. "The question is, are you?" And just like that, the rebel leader who had once held the nation hostage, fell to his knees. It wasn't strategy. It wasn't survival. It was surrender. General Bamba dropped his weapon next. His hands trembled as he raised them high. The rebellion, the great threat, had cracked without a shot fired. Because you can fight a soldier. You can even fight an army. But no one fights a man who jumps out a window with a bomb and walks back through the door. Traoré turned to his guards. "Take them," he ordered, nodding to Kosi and Bamba. "No deals. No talks. Put them in a cell." The guards obeyed instantly. Then the captain looked to Colonel Dio. "And him?" Traoré's eyes settled on his old friend, the man who had once fought by his side, who had once sworn to defend the nation, and who had traded it all for gold. "Leave him," Traoré said coldly. "I'll deal with him myself." When the room cleared, he walked to the shattered window and stood in silence, staring out over the city that had nearly died from within. Justice in court takes years. But in war? It takes a heartbeat. He turned back, tossed an empty pistol onto the table with a loud clatter, and placed a pad of paper in front of Dio. "You want escape," he said. "Too easy. You'll get exactly what you wanted." He leaned in close. The next morning, the sun rose over a capital city forever changed. There was no gunfire. No shouting. Just a kind of silence, the heavy kind that comes after chaos, when a nation realizes how close it came to losing everything. Colonel Dio was already gone. Before sunrise, he had been stripped of his rank, name, and dignity. Escorted under armed guard to the northern sector, he was handed a shovel and ordered to dig alongside the very people he had tried to sell out. There would be no court, no sentence, no cell. Only the mines. A lifetime to feel the weight of betrayal in every strike of the pickaxe. At 10 a.m., the national broadcast began. The screen flickered to life in dusty village cafes, crowded marketplaces, and city apartments. Across Burkina Faso, millions held their breath. There was no podium. Just a desk. And sitting behind it, arm in a sling, a thick bandage wrapped around his head, was President Ibrahim Traoré. He didn't wear makeup. He didn't mask the bloodstains on his collar. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who had just walked out of hell and came back to tell the tale. He looked into the camera. No teleprompter. No notes. "My people," he began, his voice hoarse but clear, "yesterday we were tested. Not by an enemy from outside, but by greed from within." He lifted the blue folder, the one containing the fake peace terms, and let it drop onto the desk with a dull thud. "We were told that peace could be bought. That if we gave up our dignity, our future, our land, violence would end. But you cannot buy peace with the currency of slavery." He paused. "Let the words settle. I have been injured. I have been betrayed. But I am still here." He leaned forward, eyes hard. A leader is not someone who hides in a bunker while his people bleed. A leader is the one who jumps out the window first. Across the country, people didn't just cheer. They wept. In that moment, Traoré wasn't just a politician. He wasn't even just a president. He was a symbol. A man who bled like them. Fought like them. Chose his people over power, justice over vengeance. The image of him, bloodied but unbowed, was etched into national memory. Colonel Dio faded into the dust of the mines, a ghost of a man swallowed by his own greed. The rebel factions, stripped of leadership and exposed, began to fracture and dissolve. And Traoré? He returned to work that same afternoon. Back to the same room. Same chair. Same table where he had faced death. On his desk, he placed a shattered wristwatch, the one that had broken when he hit the ground during the blast. The time on its cracked face was frozen at the exact second of impact. A reminder. That time is precious. That trust is fragile. And that leadership is a decision made in the hardest moment, when the clock is ticking, and the whole nation is watching to see what you'll do. This story isn't just about a bomb. It's not just about a betrayal, or a dramatic twist, or even a man diving through a window to save his people. It's about something far deeper. It's about the kind of leadership we rarely see. The kind that refuses to bend to pressure, that chooses courage over comfort, sacrifice over self-preservation. Ibrahim Traoré didn't win with weapons. He didn't win by giving in. He won by holding the line, by showing that in a world full of men willing to sell out, one man standing firm can change everything. So if this story stirred something in you, don't let that feeling fade. Because these aren't just fictional events or distant ideas. Every generation faces its own traitors. Its own false promises. Its own ticking clock. And every generation must decide, who will jump first. If you felt the weight of that decision, if you saw yourself in that moment, then share this video. Send it to someone who needs to remember that power without purpose is worthless. Click subscribe to join the growing community of people who believe in bold choices, unshakable leadership, and stories that refuse to flinch. This is not the end. This is just the beginning. Because the Ibrahim Traoré nation isn't a place, it's an idea. An ideal. A challenge. And we are just getting started.